Hey guys, I'm Sun. I'm a privacy and a security researcher, and you're watching the Privacy Guides. If you guys have been following the channel, I've published 3 episodes on Firefox. One on how to set up Firefox for privacy, the second on how to use profiles to compartmentalize things, and the third on how to mitigate fingerprinting and IP leak attacks. Now, you may be wondering why we did all of this work when we could have clicked File and open a private window. Private mode is something that is incredibly misleading, and it's the subject of today's episode. By the way, if you're new to this channel, I'll link those 3 Firefox episodes in the description and smash the subscribe button for more on privacy. Okay, when you open a private browsing window, what happens? Is that the same as everything we did in the 3 previous episodes? Well, to put that in short, the answer is absolutely not. A private browsing window actually does very little to protect your privacy, but it all boils down to who are you trying to be private from? Okay, are you trying to be private from the people in your own home, or are you trying to be private from people that could be monitoring your internet usage, such as your internet provider, DNS providers, nation-state surveillance programs, or others? So this is what I want to talk to you about today. So when I go about opening a private browsing window, what really happens is, well, the cookies, the data, and your browsing history are not stored once you close the browser. So as you may have noticed, if you followed the first guide on setting up Firefox for privacy, well, we actually configured Firefox so that when we quit Firefox, the history is gone. Actually, we're never storing the history in the first place. And cookies are deleted, so are all kinds of different data, such as local data and stuff like this. All of this stuff is flushed. So essentially, if you follow those guides, when you quit Firefox, it's exactly the same as when you quit or close a private browsing window in Firefox. So that's essentially it. That's why I use this clickbaity title saying private browsing is for porn. Even if you have a pretty robust setup like the one we configured together, well, sometimes you still want to make sure that it's even more ephemeral. You want to make sure that you don't need to quit Firefox because when you do so using the settings from the earlier episodes, well, you have to re-log into all the websites. So using a private browsing window is a very ephemeral way of going on a website and then throwing it in the garbage. So it's super useful for that, but in no way does it add additional privacy, and in no way does this make you actually private on the internet. And that is the subject of today's episode. But for that, I need to go into a few details about how the internet actually works. So we're going to start this at a very simple place. When you go on a website, I'll close this because we've discussed how a private browsing window is not much different than the one we configured. So say I go on reddit.com, okay? When I go there and I'm not logged in, what happens here is, well, I can go ahead and browse stuff, but it's not linked to my profile. So how does the website actually know who I am? And how does the website authenticate me when I, decide to join, a subreddit or something like this? Well, let's have a look. First things first, if you go in Tools and you pop open the tools, the developer tools, what happens here is we can see that, well, actually, usually it starts on Inspector, but if you click here and you go on Storage, well, that will show us that Reddit, even when we're not logged in, it already has stored a whole bunch of things about us, okay? And if we looked at local storage, there's also a bunch more. And if we look at session storage, well, there's nothing. So I guess Reddit is only using cookies and local storage. You guys have probably heard about cookies a whole bunch of times. If you don't know what a cookie is, well, I'll show you a cookie, and it's not the one your grandmother makes. A cookie is this. This is one cookie. cookies are it's an incredibly minimal way of storing little pieces of information in the browser in the context of a specific domain. So if we're looking at the CSV cookie here, we can see that the CSV is the name. The value is 1. It's specific to the reddit.com domain, and it expires at the end of the session. And that's the size. It's HTTP only, blah, blah, blah. And this is what we can see. It has a creation date. It has an expiry date. It has a specific domain and a few other preferences. So it's a really, really minimalist or minimal way of storing data related to a specific domain, hence a specific website. So what happens when I log in? Let's do this. So when I log in, okay, so when I sign, you may have seen here, oh, you see how those things here are flashing yellow. That means that cookies were just created or updated. So we now have a session cookie. And what's this here? Session tracker, session cookie. So the session cookie here, I don't know the Reddit architecture per se, but my gut feeling is this is the cookie that's responsible for us being logged in or signed in. Like right now, you can see I'm logged in. I can see my profile. Now, if I were to delete just that one here and reload the page, okay, let me see. Well, so that wasn't the one. Let me see here. Which one? Reddit session. Okay, I'll try deleting this one now. Delete Reddit session. And if I reload, boom, I am no longer logged in. So as you can see, cookies are tiny little pieces of information that store stuff related to you in the context of a specific domain. So obviously, when you're using a private browser, a private, what's this called? Jeez, private window, private browsing. When you're using that, what it essentially does is it makes cookies, local storage, session storage, ephemeral. That means that when you close the window, all of this information is automatically deleted for you. The way we configured our, normal Firefox, it's configured in a way that when you exit Firefox, the same thing occurs. So the way, private browsing works, it just makes these things a little more ephemeral. Now, one thing that you need to keep in mind is, our setup on Firefox, the private setup we did, following the tree guides of those Tree Firefox episodes, this only protects us in the context of what's happening within Firefox. So when you go on the internet and you access a website, a whole bunch of things happen that are outside of the scope of your computer. And I'm going to try to break this down. I won't lie to you. I tried recording this episode a few times and I tried to make things as simple as possible, and my own nose was bleeding. So I had to kind of dumb it down even more. I know some of you may be experts. If you are, you can follow along, but this stuff might be a little, what's the word I'm looking for? Damn. Little obvious for you, but I mean, a lot of people don't usually take the time to dig into that level of like, how does the internet actually work? So I'll break it down for you, okay? When you open up your browser, I'll close this here and I'll bring that window down. What happens is your browser needs something called DNS, Domain Name System, to find the IP address of Reddit. Okay, so I'll simulate this here using the terminal. Okay, if I do what we call a ping, a ping request on reddit.com, okay, and I stop it, you can see that reddit.com resolved to 151.101.65.140. So that's the IP address of Reddit, okay? I also have my own IP address that's assigned to me by my internet service provider. And these IP addresses are mandatory. I need to have one, Reddit needs to have one, and that's how we're able to send information to each other. And that's really inspired by the postal system. When you send a postcard to someone, not a postcard, sorry about that, wrong example, woo. When you send a letter to someone, usually at the upper left, you put your address, and in the middle, you put the address of the person to whom you're sending that letter. Why do you do that? Because the system needs to know from where the letter originated and where it's going. Then that specific letter is of a given size. And when you send a package, right, you know it. A small letter, not very expensive. A big box, more expensive. A big, very heavy box, more expensive. The size of the envelope or of the package, its weight, and the to and from addresses, all of this is in the world of internet privacy and security. That's what we call metadata. The metadata is essentially the size of the packet, what type of packet it is, and where it's going and where it originates from. You need those things in order to do things on the internet. And the process of sending packets over the internet, well, that's called TCP/IP. So you're essentially sending a bunch of letters to an IP address, and that server is taking all of those letters and it's combining them into a request. And it then processes that request, and it knows where it originated from, and then it answers. So it sends a whole bunch of letters back to you, and then your browser receives them. Well, actually, that's done by the network card, but whatever. Your computer combines them, and then your browser gets the payload and is then able to render a website. That's how the internet works, ladies and gentlemen. Hopefully this is understandable. So though that's what it works, that's what IP address is. You could have a website that's on IP 151.101. Let's go and see actually what happens if we just hit that directly. Probably they won't. Yeah, let's open the insecure page. Okay, there we go. Okay, so obviously they don't want us to access Reddit on that specific IP address, but you could host a website on a specific IP, and that's how things were at the beginning of the internet. Okay, nowadays people cannot remember things such as 151.101 blah blah blah. That's too hard to remember. People need to remember words, and that's where remembering reddit.com is a lot more relatable for our human minds. And the IP, that's machine stuff, okay? So you need something called DNS, the domain name system. It's essentially a big database of domains and IP addresses that, you know, the domain is replacing in the context of human stuff, okay? So reddit.com resolves to 151.101.65.140. I hope you're following me so far. Okay, so once this is done, your to access Reddit.com, your computer first needs to ask a DNS server, hey server, you know, Reddit.com, you know what the IP address is for that? And then the DNS server will say, oh yeah, cool, yeah, it's 151.101, and then your computer is going to send a bunch of packets using TCP/IP to the servers of Reddit, and Reddit is going to receive them, you know, and use the metadata and the payload to understand what you're trying to do. And in this specific case, when I reload the page here, what I'm doing essentially is I'm sending a request to Reddit. I'm saying, hey Reddit, here's my IP. I would like to have the content of the homepage, please. And then Reddit will process this request and it will send stuff back my way to my IP address. Why am I saying all of this and using a whole bunch of your time for that? Well, because that is fundamental. When you want to be private on the internet, a lot of the stuff you want to be private from may be happening outside of your home. It may be happening in the internet layer, not in the browser layer. And that's where you may be wanting to use a VPN, a proxy, or Tor to access the internet without revealing your origination IP. And that will be the subject of other episodes in the future. If you're into that kind of stuff, smash that subscribe button and we'll get there in the future. So when your computer wants to go on a website, whatever the settings we have in Firefox, whatever the settings are, okay, unless you're using a proxy, but we'll more on that in a future episode, you're essentially sending a request through your internet service provider. You want to access a DNS server to know what the IP address is of Reddit, and then you're sending packets over to Reddit using their IP address. What that can reveal, okay, is if someone such as your internet service provider or a nation state surveillance program is tracking you, well, they know that because they know your source, your origination IP address, they know that you're accessing Reddit because the IP address of Reddit is public domain. So you're essentially leaking what kind of websites you're browsing. And again, to mitigate that, VPNs, proxies, or Tor can be helpful. That will be the subject of a future episode. So I hope that gave you a little bit of context on why, everything we did in the context of Firefox and why using a private window, well, that doesn't mean you're private in the context of the internet layer. You're not. And again, if you're into this stuff, smash the subscribe button and we'll get there in future episodes. If you have questions about how the internet works, drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them. I didn't want to go too much in detail. If you want, perhaps an episode on DNS, on, TCP/IP, or on HTTP and HTTPS, let me know. But maybe that's a bit too nerdy for this audience. Anyways, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys soon.